I'd like to welcome you to the Cleveland Institute for Computational Biology and IQVIA Joint OHDSI OMOP Common Data Model and Atlas Workshop. My name is Mark Bino, and I'm a Senior Director with the CICB. The Cleveland Institute for Computational Biology was formed by Case Western Reserve University, University Hospitals, and the Cleveland Clinic. We also have funding through projects with Metro Health and the VA, as well as other grants and contracts such as the CTSC. The Institute is led by Dr. Jonathan Haynes. He's also the chair of Population and Quantitative Health Sciences at Case Western Reserve University. We are administratively housed at the university. This is a slide showing some of the various faculty leadership. And this is a slide showing some of the people you'll see today who form the Translational Informatics team, and it's what we're here about today. So the mission of the Institute is to advance our fundamental knowledge of human health by using computational methods on big and diverse data sets, or big data, and to promote the translation of this knowledge into better diagnoses, prognoses, treatments, preventions, and delivery within the healthcare system. So how do we achieve our mission? We do it through what I like to call the Cleveland Institute for Computational Biology ecosystem, which is composed of various aspects such as our academic programs and our cores. But today we're focused really just on our participation in the OHDSI Collaborative. In the future, we'll focus on how you take things from this collaborative and extend them with tools such as Immerse, which lets you search through unstructured data from the EHR and other feeder systems. So what is OHDSI? OHDSI stands for the Observational Health Data Sciences and Informatics Collaborative. No one actually uses that long term. It's just called OHDSI. It's relatively new. It's been around for about 5 years, maybe. This 5th annual symposium, maybe 2013 till now, so about 6 years. And it's a group of people who, you'll hear the history of it a little later, but imagine taking all the patient data and all the various EHRs and other feeder systems and creating a standard model to view this patient data in one place, to do analytics and visualization and look at your patient population. The community continues to grow, and it's stakeholder driven. There's no one vendor that's behind this. Even though IQVIA is doing this presentation today, there's all kinds of companies, academic medical centers, pharmaceutical companies, payers even, that are involved. And there's no smoke and mirrors to this. It's not a vendor-driven where we're going to charge you $1 million and there's going to be a license fee. This is all open source software that you can download today and start to play with. There's a passion to those who do this. As an example, he's an MD in South Korea? Yes. An MD in South Korea that joins the weekly community calls on Tuesdays when it's about 3 o'clock in the morning his time, and it's impressive. There's a lot to learn. These 2 days are just going to touch on the model and show you what's possible and the various aspects of the Atlas tool. Fortunately, there are a lot of teachers out there, and there's online forums that'll be covered as well in these sessions. And to me, because of the millions of patients it covers, it's really the dawn of being able to do real population health informatics. We'll talk a little bit more about that later too. And this is the future, and the future is now. Bold statement. And instead of me describing a little bit about OHDSI, I'm not going to have you read this. This is one member's description, which was a really elegant post on the forum, but the take-home message out of it is, why is she in this? She's at CHOP in a thing called PEDSnet, which is a pediatric network that shares data among various pediatric hospitals, such as Nationwide and CHOP. And as you look here, I'm just going to let you read some of this to talk about how it's really interdisciplinary. You know, it takes a village kind of thing. And it really does, because, you know, the idea that someone's going to be a medical expert, a data expert, a stats expert, a programmer, all combined is rare, right? I mean, it really is rare. And so it takes the best of all of these people and puts them together in a common vision to improve the, human health. A big example I wanted to share is at the UC system. Atul Butte, who's the head of the Baker Computational Health Sciences Institute for the University of California, San Francisco, is getting together the UC system to cover 14 million unique patient lives. Now imagine what you can do if you could do data analytics on that group of people. But they're making it happen, and they're creating a data analytics platform to look at these people. So the question is, can we do this in Cleveland? Can we get the various hospitals here to get together and share data in a meaningful way, which is the mission of the Institute, to advance what I would call regional population health instead of what hospitals refer to as population health of their individual systems. I would say that Cleveland's got a lot of things. We've got our academic medical centers, we've got arts and culture, we formerly had LeBron James. We have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but the other thing we have is we're a leader in infant mortality for Cuyahoga County. It's a horrible statistic, and it's really kind of unacceptable, right? So it behooves us to share data in a meaningful way to prevent infant mortality, to prevent certain diseases, to cure people, to take care of our population, and we may be forced to do so anyway. At HIMSS this week, CMS and ONC proposed new regulations on data sharing. Basically patients will be able to get their data for free out of these systems. So if it's going to be mandated and legislated, we might as well just do it now, right before it's forced upon us. So before I turn it over to IQVIA, I want to say that we're going to have a face-to-face meeting of OHDSI in June, which is a gathering kind of all of the stakeholders in OHDSI that really participate, so the leadership of OHDSI, anyone that wants to contribute, and it's a face-to-face working meeting where there's going to be an end product. It's going to be running a whole OHDSI study from start to finish and documenting all of the steps so that this book can be created called the Book of OHDSI, and we can supplement that book with this face-to-face meeting. More details will come out about that later. But without further ado, I will turn it over to Mui Van Zandt and Megan Patine from IQVIA. And I hope we learn a lot today. And this is being recorded as well, so others can watch the videos as well. And thank you very much.
Good morning. Let me get out of that one. So good morning. Thank you, Ben. Oh, sorry, not Ben. Mark, for the introduction. Today, it's really a two-day course, but the first day, what you guys are going to learn is the OMOP Common Data Model and the standardized vocabulary. There's 3 names up there. One of them is not here yet, but I do have to put his name on there because he's our boss, as well as he's one of the PIs, principal investigator of OHDSI. He's an MD. He is, like Mark described, one of those crazy MDs that are up at 3 a.m. in the morning attending some Asian call, probably, from Europe. So that's where, like Mark says, we are very passionate. Now, Mark did introduce us as IQVIA folks, so we do belong to IQVIA as a company. But for today, we are also OHDSI members. So what you're going to hear us talk about is everything about OHDSI. So nothing here is to sell IQVIA in any way, shape, or form. So we'll put that disclaimer out there. For today and tomorrow, our hats are OHDSI members. IQVIA just pays for me to come here. Okay? So what are you guys going to learn today? Very highly, you're going to learn basically high level. You're going to learn a history of OMOP and OHDSI, what those acronyms stand for. How does the standardized vocabulary work? How do we find concepts? How do we navigate this whole hierarchy that you're about to see? And what is this OMOP Common Data Model? What is it to begin with, right? And how do you use it? And then lastly, you're going to learn in here is how to use Atlas as a tool, okay? The agenda looks like this. I'm going to go through it very briefly. Basically, we put some breaks in there for you guys to have some time. Lunch is an hour and a half. But this is a session that is interactive. So if you guys have questions, stop me. If I'm going too fast, stop me. If I'm too boring, let me know as well. Just provide any feedback you want, and we will try to answer and make this as fun and as entertaining as possible. Hopefully you guys do have your laptops, because some of the exercises and the work that we're going to have you do will be on laptops. If you don't, that's okay. You can share laptops with others. So again, I'm here, Megan's here. Tomorrow you will actually meet Christian Reich. Like I said, we all work for IQVIA, but we are very active members of the OHDSI community. Christian Reich is an MD. He currently actually can practice in Germany, just not in the United States. But I think we have enough doctors in here if anything goes wrong, right? So we're good there. I don't have a medical background. I actually have an IT background. I'm a software business analyst by trade, but I participate a lot in the OHDSI community as well. I'm the leader of Themis. I teach these tutorials worldwide in 2 different languages, so in Chinese as well. Not so well, but I can, I think. And then Megan over here, is one of our analysts, and she also participates in the community a lot. She helps with some of the tutorials like she's helping today. She's in many of our different working groups, like the Themis working group, and she has a vast knowledge of OMOP because she's done a lot of conversions, and she actually worked with the FDA on one of the projects that we have with them. So there's a lot of OMOP experienced people in the room. So like I said, feel free to ask us a bunch of questions. So like Mark suggested, this is being recorded. Still okay to ask questions. Because we do have a schedule we're trying to follow, some of your questions may be taken offline, either during the break or during lunch or even afterwards if you guys want to come and ask us. And like I said, if you don't have a laptop, it's okay. Buddy up with someone next to you. Hopefully we'll make this fun and exciting. Okay, so we're going to start off by saying, what is OHDSI? What is OMOP and what is OHDSI, right? This particular chart here is a chart of FDA withdrawals by decade. So if you look at it, you'll notice that, pretty much it flatlined on average about 10 a decade until the early 2000s, where it spiked up to 25. Well, that got people's attention when this went out, and it got Congress's attention. So what Congress did was call in FDA and asked, why? Why did we suddenly spike, from an average of 10 for 40 years? We were doing so well. Then suddenly we went up to 25 because, the public opinion then comes in and goes, wait, are we, as drug manufacturers producing drugs that are more harmful to people? Right? Or is something wrong? So FDA had to look into this and try to understand why this was the case. Of course, number one, you do have cases like Merck and Vioxx where, we did have people who unfortunately did die from the medication that they took. But also, if you kind of correlate this with the time of data information, right? During these years, there wasn't a lot of data being collected. Even if they were on pieces of paper. In the 2000s, everything started getting electronic, so people had more access to data and availability to see the side effects of what these drugs were doing. So they were able to understand the effects, therefore be able to pull out the drugs a little bit more. So that's really what happened here, but Congress basically called FDA in and said, we have to do something about it because we can't have these reports coming out like this all the time. And watching it spike the next 10 years by, another 200%. So what they called FDA to do is to establish a risk identification system that systematically and reproducible process to effectively generate evidence to support the characterization of a potential effect of medical products, okay? So here, when Congress wrote this in, and they said that by July of 2010, you have to have at least 25 million patients in that system. By July of 2012, you have to have 100 million of those patients in the system. This was great. Congress like, I accomplished something, right? Pharma's like, no way. You're going to do this, and now you're going to yank out all my drugs. Every drug I put out in the market, you're going to just yank out because there's one little problem with one little patient. So pharma was not very pleased with it. And they're like, and how are you guys going to do this? Because I don't think you guys know how to do this. So pharma went in and worked with FDA and said, look, FDA, you don't have data at all, because you don't. You can't collect data. It's by regulation that you guys can't keep any data in your databases. We have the data. We have done this research for years. So why don't we all work together? And it's just not me and you. Let's add in some academic institutions to make it all fair. So that's really how the OMOP experiment was born. And they started this first experiment in 2009 and 2010. And honestly, OMOP, they call it, it was an accident. Because what they had to do in this particular proposal was that they decided to take 10 different data sources, claims and EHR. And Christian is a lot more colorful when he describes this because he was actually physically there. And he said, basically, you know, you have these 17 different people in the room from pharma, from academic, and also from FDA. They're sitting in the room and they're arguing over, is it claims better or is it EHR better? Which one to use, right? Which one to use, which one's better? Because you can have the argument of claims is better because it's more longitudinal. And it shows exactly, because it follows the money. It shows exactly what the patient got, right? But then we had the argument on the other end was like, no, EHRs are better because doctors are good people. They're going to write down exactly what happened to the patient. Versus the claim people, yeah, you're following the money, so they could be faking some of that stuff, right? Just so that they can get the money for it. So that argument went on for a while, and they basically ultimately agreed to use both. Right, so we have 10 EHRs and claims in there. And then there were 14 methods that they finally agreed to in order to do this experiment. Now, the problem there was if you have 10 databases, 14 methods, each database is in its own structure. And 14 methods, each method had about 1,000 lines of code. So if you do the math there's 140 programs you're going to have to write with 1,000 lines of code each. That's going to take forever, right? So what they decided to do was, why don't we put these 10 databases into a common data model, so then we only have to write 14 methods for it. And that actually is the birth of OMOP. That's how OMOP became this common data model for this particular project. And what were they trying to do in this project? Basically, they wanted to create a system that can be trusted, right? How do you create a system that's trusted when you've never actually done this before? So what they decided to do is they decided to take a bunch of drugs and a bunch of outcomes that they already knew the results for. And these were drugs in the 1960s, 1950s that, and for no doubt that folks will all agree that the outcomes are true, okay, and try to replicate that. So that's what this is down here. So these are the outcomes, and these are the classes. So the red stands for it's a negative effect, right? So ACE inhibitors has a negative effect. And then the blue are really there is no effect, or it doesn't do harm or it doesn't do good. Versus the green means it helps out. So ACE inhibitors has a good effect on hospitalization. So by taking your inhibitors, you don't go to the hospital as much, right? So those are kind of proven facts from their perspective. So they were trying to replicate this study. And then they did a second experiment in 2011 and 2012. Very similar, but the difference was they knocked down the number of outcomes and added more drugs and added a positive and negative testing to it, okay? And then Europe also tried to replicate that same study in Europe. I'm gonna skip through all that, sorry. And basically in 2013, when the funding for all these projects ran out, they had a symposium to say, okay, we spent all this money from the government, what are our end results, right? So here's basically the end result of it, and it's heterogeneous in estimating due to the choice of the database. Because depending on which database that you are in, each database has its own little quirks and its own little issues or its own little reasons, right? So like you guys have data assets in Cleveland. EHRs and EHRs and claims are very different. They operate very differently. Like I said, one has to follow CMS standards, and the other is really for the person getting paid or the providers getting paid. So they have little differences in the two. One's by revenue code because you want to charge, right? And then there's also heterogeneous in the estimations due to the analytic choices. So there is a big difference if you pick a 60-day gap versus a 30-day gap. Because maybe your errors, then you have one drug that'll show up in an error in one way because it's a 30-day gap versus it'll drop out if it's a 60-day gap. Or your washout period, or what you define as a new user of something, right? Those do differ as well if you use 6 months or 12 months. So depending on that, your patients may go in and go out. There was really, except for little heterogeneous due to the outcome definition. Also, what they found out is that they had a pretty good area under the curve, 0.7, right? 1 is you're perfectly on, 0 is the other way around, 50% is you toss a coin, right? So to have a 0.7 to do this data analysis by using data instead of clinical trials or research, they thought that was great and impressive to do. And of course, the self-control methods are going to be a little bit better. From here, they ended up saying, okay, funding's gone. FDA took all this and made it into their own thing, took the IP. And that was the end of what they call OMOP, so Observational Medical Outcome Partnership. Again, you don't have to remember the acronym. Everybody calls it OMOP. It's actually a verb now. Have you OMOPed your database in yet? Or sometimes we say we're OMOPing at this moment. So from there, it ended, the collaboration ended between all the different parties. And like I said, FDA took that information and kept it to their own. However, the people that actually was participating in this particular effort, including the FDA, they said they thought that this was such a great collaboration, because to have pharma, academia, and the government all sit there to try to to get a project going to better understand health and outcomes research, they thought it was a great effort and this novel concept. So what they ended up doing is creating something different, because like I said, they couldn't take any of the FDA stuff, the OMOP stuff, and keep it because that was funded by FDA, so FDA took all that. So they ended up creating OHDSI. It stands for Observational Health Data Science and Informatics. Nobody remembers that. Everybody calls it OHDSI, and don't spell it like the Odyssey as a journey. Okay, it's OHDSI. Why OHDSI? Because back in 2013, that was the only 5-letter domain that was free. And it sounded like Odyssey. Because what we want to do in OHDSI is basically, we're saying this is a journey. This is a journey to better healthcare. So they wanted it to be like the Greeks, you know, a journey to a new world, right? So everything in OHDSI you'll see, besides the rabbits and Usagi, they're all Greek gods. So Atlas, Arachne, Athena, they're all Greek gods, okay? So if you want to create a new project in OHDSI, it has to be a Greek god. That's the rule. That's the only one rule we have. So who are we? Mark kind of went into this a little bit. We are a group of passionate fanatics. We have people all over the place. We have people of different backgrounds. We have people of different ethnicities, okay? Like I said, I'm a computer science geek. My boss is a doctor. You know, Megan came, I think, from a different realm as well, but we all get together. I mean, Mark over here is from the academic world. We have folks in here from the FDA. We have biostatisticians in there. We have epidemiologists in there. We have architects in there. We have UI designers in there. So we have a wide range of people in the community. And it is an international network of researchers and observational databases. So like Mark mentioned earlier, we have folks from Korea, Chan. Chan is a Korean doctor, but he's also getting his PhD. He's in the area of the heart, somewhere like that. But he is up at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning, attending all the calls that we have on the on this coast, right? And we have the European side. We have actually 4 different symposiums every year. So we have them all over the world. We have them in Korea, China, Europe, and then the United States. So we are quite worldwide. Our website, like I said, it's down there, odyssey.org. So you have to spell it this way. If you spell it any other way, you won't find us. Our mission is to improve health by empowering a community to collaboratively generate the evidence that promotes better health decisions and better care. Okay. Before last year, our target was to get 1 billion patients in our OHDSI network. By the symposium last year, we outdid that by a mile. We now have 1.9 billion patients around the world. 19 countries with 114 databases. And these are the ones that are known. Okay, these are the ones who actually comes and tells the community, hey, we're already OMOP. You know, actually, for example, UC Davis or the UC systems, we didn't know they were an OMOP until recently, but they did it. So again, they're under the radar, right? Unless you actually come out to the community and say, yes, our database is in OMOP and we would like to participate in network studies with you guys, we don't know about them. Some folks do use OMOP, but we don't know. And as you can tell, we are all over the world. Of course, we're more centralized in the United States because that's where it started. But we are gaining popularity in the European countries as well as the Asian countries. The entire Korean population will be in OMOP probably in the next 3 or 4, maybe 3 years. The government has actually issued grants this year specifically to build their health information platform in OMOP. So that's what's happening in Korea, and that's led by Professor Park, who is very instrumental when it comes to Korea. So now why are we so passionate about, using this model in observation research, and why are we so passionate about working together? What you see here is a little plot graph that basically is trying to depict the number of the little red dots represents that a paper or some kind of evidence was generated for these drugs and these outcomes, okay? And we had to actually make the dots a little bit redder so that you can actually see it on the paper. But you can notice that a lot of this is white. So up to now, there's a lot of areas that we have not done research on, that we have not gone in and said, does this drug have any effect on these particular outcomes? We have not done any of that. So if we continue down our current path of traditionally doing research, which can take, anywhere up to 6 to a year or 2 years, or sometimes like certain things, 30 years, I don't think we'll ever finish this. Not in my lifetime. I don't think in anyone's lifetime here, or even maybe my grandkids' lifetime. So what we want to develop is something that's more systematic, that can help us basically fill this paper up with red dots. Okay, and that's really why we're so passionate for what we do. We want to be able to come up with better healthcare solutions for humans, basically. And if you look at today's approach, right, what is today's approach? Today's approach is this one study, one script. Like I mentioned earlier in the FDA project, that you have 10 databases, 14 methodologies. You're going to have to write one for each, and that's 140. So that is today's approach. When you want to know the adherence of your drug to the data asset that you own, right? We use these little irons because they look like applications. They're technically applications as well. And this becomes an adherence methodology, right? And that has to be plugged in somewhere. Well, that's a US plug. So, but the problem is when you have them all over the world, the plugs are all different, right? So when you go across to a different country or even a different database from Cerner to Epic, they're going to be a different format. So then you have to go and reformat your entire study in order to get that information out of the other system. So this becomes very, very cumbersome, which then is where you adapt. You have these little plugs that you adapt to it, right? Adapters here, and it becomes this mess of computer cords. Like I said, I'm a computer geek. So you see a lot of computer cords here. It's not scalable. It's not transparent. It's very expensive because only the technical experts can do this, right? Makes me even more valuable, but that's a different story. It's very slow because it takes us a long time because we have to learn every data asset and the ins and outs of the data asset and then turn that program into the other data assets so that it could be used, right? And it really prohibits the use of non-expert people. So if a doctor wanted to run something very quickly, it's very hard for them to do it across multiple databases. So this is the current day approach. And that's why what we want to do is standardize things. Because if you standardize things, things are a lot easier. So here, if you turn all the plugs into one, right? If you think about it, all your appliances here all plug in. In the United States. We all plug things in and we don't even think about how that works. You can even do it to where, you know, you can, once you get it all standardized, you can spend your time building these other applications like mortality, like safety signal, or if you're in the commercial world, source of business. The other thing you can build is this little Tesla. So, you know, I don't know, 10 years ago, you would think, okay, electricity is really meant for just laptops and, like I said, appliances. But now you can plug a Tesla in and it drives, right? You don't have to use gas anymore. So it's the same thing in the health world. We don't have to stick to our traditional way of doing research. We can build things greater and better than what we have today. We can break those if we had everything in a common data model. So on this side, this is what we call the common data model. These are what we call tools, okay? And on top of that, going towards that Tesla model, your analysis can be remote, right? Today, a lot of people are saying you don't share data because it's PHI or it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, or it's secure. It has to be behind my firewall. You can't come into it, you can't touch my data because I'm going to get sued or it's just against policy, right? But because you're all on the same common data model, you know the model already. You know the terminology that's being used. So you can write the analytic, you just can't see the data. But that analytic can be run remotely, and it can actually be executed behind a firewall. Okay, sounds crazy, but we've done this quite a few times already. Okay, and on top of it, you could do this across multiple networks. Like Mark was showing earlier, UC Davis, how in the world did they get all those, you know, different UCs to work with each other? Because they're on the OMOP model and the data never has to leave each UC system. You know, UC Davis stays in one place, UC Irvine stays in one place, UC LA stays in one place. They don't ever leave. They all use the same common language. It's kind of like, if this helps, it's like right now I speak English to all of you because it's the international language. One, I'm in the United States, but you guys all understand English, right? But if I started speaking Mandarin to you, you won't understand a word I say. But it makes things a lot more efficient because I'm speaking the same language that you all understand. And that's what OMOP brings to the table. It's the same universal language, same universal structure that everyone can understand if you're using that model. Okay, any questions so far? Cool. Okay, so how do we do this, right? How do we establish this universal language and this universal model that can be used to help us do research? Well, we have this thing called vocabulary. We name it vocabulary because I think it makes a little bit more sense. It's really all of your medical terms. So ontology, taxonomy, I've heard it called a billion different things. So the vocabulary basically is all of that inside a couple of tables. Okay, so what we're gonna learn here in the next session is teach you what that vocabulary is. Okay, and like I said, I stick to OHDSI terms, because if you say vocabulary, then everybody in the OHDSI community knows what it is. So what is our vocabulary model? Again, it's very standardized. And it houses all of the existing vocabularies. One thing about OHDSI is we are free. We are 100% free. So we try to bring in all the free stuff. You know, the list of NDC numbers are free. The list of ICD numbers, are ICD-9s and ICD-10s are free. So we have all the free ones. We do have some that requires licensing, but a majority of them are free. Okay, and we try to use things that are free out there to begin with. So SNOMED already translates everything to ICD-9, ICD-10. Guess what? We just take that and we put it into our model. We don't go and do that ourselves, because that would take us way too long. Okay, it is not, what it is not a static database. We update this on a regular basis, sometimes on a weekly basis, sometimes on a monthly basis, but we update it quite a bit. And that's because if people have problems with it, we continuously update it. But also because it houses the vocabulary of many different countries. So the Canadian drug system is actually in this model as well. So is the German one, so is the Belgium one, the UK recode, they're all in there. So it's compiled, again, like I said, from different places of both private and public ones. The private ones, you have to have a key. If you have a license key for it, you can get. The public ones, they're free, download away. Okay. And it is a finished product. We do have an entire vocabulary maintenance team, and I'll show you in a second an entire vocabulary, an entire forum that you can go to actually come up with any problems you have about our vocabulary. Here we go. So this is our website, like I said, ohdsi.org. Okay, go to ohdsi.org and you will find anything you ever want to know about us. We're free, we're transparent, we try to document everything. However, this is a community, so if you do see outdated documentation, don't complain to us, log in and update it yourself. So we are, it is, a lot of us, we do this on our extra time. Sometimes I'm up at 8 p.m. attending a China call, because we feel like it. Out here, you'll notice this is our homepage. Like Mark says, we do have events. The next one, from what I can tell, it is the Case Western one, right? And then we have the annual symposium that's already here. You can come in here, get to our tools, get to our past events. You can get to a lot of stuff. We have a forum. If you go to the forum, this is where you'll see the vocabulary people are here. So this is the vocabulary user group. So again, if you have any questions about our vocabulary, or if you find something that's incorrect in our vocabulary, put it there, somebody will update it, and you can download the next one, probably within a week or so. So this is what we mean by it's a finished product. They have a lot of people actually who talks in these things. So there's an ATC working group, there's how to use the vocabulary file if you ever want to use it. This is the rework of the hierarchy of the providers and the place of service. So again, we have forums, we have stuff that you can go out there and chat about. So this is the model. We are currently on OMOP CDM v6. We do upgrade ourselves. We are an open community, and one of the things that I love about the OMOP model compared to all the other ones like I2P2 and Sentinel is the fact that we do listen to the community and that we do enhance it per the community's feedback and per community's demand. We don't keep a static model. It doesn't stay static for too long. Now, there are pros and cons to it because as an organization, to always stay at the latest and greatest is not the easiest thing. but we are backward compatible as well. So if you're still on V5, that's okay. V6 is compatible with V5. We won't focus on the two left-hand sides. We're going to really focus right now on the right-hand side here. This is the vocabulary section. Okay, and you don't have to know all this because we're only really going to focus in a second on 3 different tables, but I just wanted to show you that we are very standardized. What we're going to focus on are these 3 tables: the concept table, the concept relationship table, and the concept ancestor table. Okay, what are concepts? Well, concepts is everything. Every medical term or every answer, every question you can think of, every test result you can think of, everything. Basically, if I put it in a simpler form, it's a lookup table. It's a lookup, right? It's all of your attributes and then or everything that you can look up. So concept relationship really is a relationship from one concept to another. And then concept ancestor is the hierarchical structure of one of our standard or one of our classification groupings. So ATC, their ancestral relationship, all of their hierarchy would be in here. RX norm has a hierarchy, SNOMED has a hierarchy. They would all be stored in here. Okay. So like I said, concept is one big gigantic table. We do not separate out drugs from conditions, from procedures, from genders, from ethnicity. Everything is big, one big gigantic table, and what you'll find in there is all the different concepts, and then we have what we call vocabulary ID that helps you distinguish between the different type of classifications. So you'll see NDC in there, you'll see GPI in there, you'll see FDB in there, you'll see ICD-9, ICD-10, IC9 procedure, IC10 procedure, CPTs, HCPCS, revenue codes, LOINC, you name it. Your gender, your ethnicity, your specialties, everything all sits in this one big gigantic table. There is a naming convention for it, but I won't bore you with that because I never remember what all the different levels are. And it's just going to take you too long. I think we have about 5 million concepts in there, so you don't want to remember all of them anyways. Like I said, it's stacked in one table, and there's the vocabulary ID. So each classification is a vocabulary ID. It's from all over the world. Even VA is in here as well. Why do we do this? Again, why do we standardize everything into one, right? Because if you look at stuff like LOINC today, if you go look up LOINC, you'll find different formatting of LOINC. Even the list of LOINC codes, you find different formatting of them. Like this one particularly, you'll see the LOINC code is right there. But then this is another format that you can get LOINC codes in, and the code is over here. And then here's another format of it. And the coding is over here. So we, again, instead of having people go out there and find which one is the right one that we're using, we put everything into one standard concept table. So you have everything, it's always the same format, nothing changes. Okay, and what is that format, and what does one of those little records in that table look like? So this is what that table looks like. We have the concept ID, and I know a lot of people will say, what, you want me to remember another ID? Because this one is unique to the OMOP model. This is our unique generator of that particular concept, and we never reuse. So if we made a mistake and we have to correct it, we don't actually correct it. We deactivate this one and we create a new one. So you'll never ever see that concept ID 313217 will always represent SNOMED's atrial fibrillation. That's it. It won't change, unlike NDC numbers where you can reuse those numbers. Okay, now why do we create, our own concept ID versus using the code that's already there? And I'll explain it to you later, but it's really because we're merging all these different systems, all these different classifications into one, and you probably can guess by now that they will overlap. So instead of doing that, we decided that we're just going to use a unique identifier in our system that goes up. Okay, that's why it can keep going. The concept name is the name, the English description of that particular name by that particular vocabulary. So SNOMED calls this particular term atrial fibrillation. Okay. The domain, which is very important, is what is it? In this particular case, SNOMED is saying it's a condition. Okay. The vocabulary is the classification, so in this case, it's SNOMED. The class is the classification within that particular vocabulary. So SNOMED, for SNOMED, this is a clinical finding. The little S is actually very important, and we'll talk about that. You'll hear more and more about this. There's 3 in here. It's either blank, it's either a C, or it's an S. In OMOP, again, we try to standardize everything. S stands for the standard. And that's what you want to use when you're doing research. You always want to be looking at the standard. What is the standard? Because that's going to be what's in the database. And that's how you're going to be able to go across all the different databases that you're ever going to want to do research on, is you want to look things up by the standard vocabulary, by the standard concept. Okay. And the next one is the concept code, which is the code of the original system. So in this case, this is SNOMED's code for atrial fibrillation. Okay, and then the last series here is their validity duration interval. 1970 means it started before we started capturing this database, and we were not going to go back and figure out when this term was actually activated. Okay. And then 2099, we used, it used to be 1999, I think, no. Can't remember, but we use 2099 because we're saying by that date we won't be around anymore, so our next generation can worry about turning it to 2199. Basically, this means it's valid and it hasn't expired. Okay, if there's an invalid reason in here, it'll tell you why. Either it was duplicate, deactivated, or something, and then it'll have an end date. Okay. Oh, that's fun. Sorry, huh? My little, should be that first. But what you're going to see when we talk about, as we progress through the day, you're going to hear me using certain ingredients and certain disease. And it's because we base this course off of this particular paper that was written by Graham. And it's a dabigatran and warfarin comparison to better understand which one of those drugs cause more bleeding. So what you're going to hear us talk a little bit more about is, you'll hear us talking about dabigatran and warfarin. How do you look up gastrointestinal hemorrhage and atrial fibrillation? So you'll hear us using these terms quite a bit throughout the study, throughout the course today. So, okay. So I know a lot of you guys are not SQL folks, so we won't, in this class originally was built so folks can understand how to use the system using SQL, okay? But we're not gonna have a bunch of you guys go through and take beginning SQL. We're not doing that. So, but we are gonna use SQL to logically explain to you what we are doing. And then we're gonna actually use applications to have you go in and browse it yourself. So use your applications so you're not having to learn these techie geeky talk over here, okay? But if you wanted to look at a concept inside the concept table, you basically would do this, do a select on the concept table where it's that 313217, and you'll end up getting a record that looks like this. Very similar to the picture that I showed you a little bit before. Like I said, we store everything in our databases. I mean everything. And we have 3 different types of concepts, okay? The first one is our standard concept. What that means is basically OMOP has decided that this is our universal language. We, in the OMOP world, when it comes to conditions, diseases, is going to speak in SNOMED terms. Okay, so like I said, it's similar to what I said earlier about languages, right? We all pick English as the language that we're going to use here. So we're going to be speaking SNOMED terms. I know the first thing everybody says is, I don't use SNOMED. I use ICD-9, I use ICD-10. I'm used to it, stop it. I don't want to learn something new, okay? We understand that. So we have a way to make it easier that you don't have to actually use the SNOMED terms, and you can still use your ICD-9 and ICD-10s to get to the SNOMED terms, okay? But I just want to let you know that when you're doing research, you can start with your ICD-9s, but ultimately the concepts that you use needs to be in SNOMED, okay? And then we have classifications. The only classification here is the measure classification. Basically, I can come from this classification to get to these codes using the concept ancestor table and be able to walk between the two easily, okay? These are what we call source concepts, and they are in the data, but we do not recommend. Actually, we tell you guys, don't use these when you're doing research. You can start here, but you cannot end here, okay? So how do you go and find a concept? So the first thing, like I said earlier, is you can do the select star and you'll find it, right? A second way is if you know the code. So you know the SNOMED code of this 494-36004. You could do it that way, and if you do that, you'll find exactly the same thing. Okay. This kind of goes into why code versus ID, right? So again, I mentioned earlier, we have a unique identifier in our system, and that is the ID. Okay, why? Because if you do this, select star, and you go using the code of concept 1001, you're gonna get a ton of these. You will. And they all match to different stuff. So I don't know if you knew that 1001 for RX norm is an ingredient, is this particular ingredient, versus down here it's a revenue code. So therefore we cannot go by the code because we merge everything into one big gigantic table. So that's why we create our own unique identifier for every single thing. Every single code, each one of these has a unique concept ID. It's not shown here, but each one of them has a unique concept ID. Okay. Another way that you guys normally look things up is by name, right? You type in atrial fibrillation, right? You can do that. So you can still type in atrial fibrillation and you'll find everything that has to do with atrial fibrillation. But you'll find that some are standards, some are classifications, some are blank. So the blank, like I said, these are source codes. So this is probably very familiar to some of you, 427.31 for atrial fibrillation ICD-9. But you'll also see that there are two standards in here, okay? And that's why I said earlier you gotta pay attention to the domain, because the domain tells you what I am, okay? This particular one is a condition versus this one is a measurement value. So there is an answer to a LOINC question somewhere that has atrial fibrillation in there, and that's a standard as well. So when you're looking these up, you have to know where you're in, right? Am I looking for the condition, or am I looking for the measurement, or am I looking for the drug or the procedure, okay? Now, like I said, most of you guys are very familiar with the ICD-9, ICD-10 codes, right? You're gonna use 427.31. because that's what you're going to do when you do research, or someone hands over to you, go find me this study, and here are my list of codes. They're going to be in the source codes, and it's going to be ICD-9 or ICD-10. So this is the ICD-10 code. So this is what you get, but you'll notice again, this is not standard. So if you're trying to run this in the OMOP databases, you're not going to find anything. Your result come back is going to be 0. If you go say, go find me patients who has this particular code, you're going to find 0. Okay. So what you have to do is then you have to go to our concept relationship table, because like I said earlier, that's where the relationships between one concept and the other is documented. Well, in this concept relationship table, we've documented what they map to. So what is the equivalent SNOMED code to this particular ICD-9 code? So when you do that, you're going to get these two IDs. Okay, from a codes perspective, you get IDs. I'm walking through this a little bit quickly because I want to get to the part where I'll show you actually how to do this in an application, because I know I'm going to bore you with SQL queries. Okay, So why do we map? Okay, I'm going to skip all that. Sorry. So this is basically, if you look at it logically, how we would do this, right? You start off with atrial fibrillation, take that code and put it in that concept relationship table and gets the maps to. And I would end up with this particular code over here. And if you look up that particular code, you will get atrial fibrillation, okay? So all that, how do you, as a non-SQL person, a non-geek who has no access to a database of all these things, look this stuff up? Like I said, we are very free. We have a tool out there called Athena that you can go to actually do this. So if I can have all you guys go to that website, athena.odyssey.org. So I will go there as well. Uh-oh. Is this big enough? Can you guys see, or do I need to make it bigger? Okay, I got thumbs up. Someone's paying attention to me. So this is Athena. This is our vocabulary browsing application. It's free. It's supported by the community. It's loaded always with the latest and greatest vocabulary. It's also where, if you were maintaining your OMOP conversions, this is where you actually go to download all the vocabularies. If you log in, you can actually, if I remember my own username and password. Yeah, maybe I won't do it. Forget it. But if you go log in, you can actually go download all the different vocabularies that are free. But if you go here, so like we did earlier, right? You want to look up, 427.31. You just type it in. And do the little, oh, if you guys log in, you want to hit the accept button. There's an accept portion if you've never logged in for the first time. I apologize. I've logged in 1,000,000 times, so I don't have to accept it. It's just saying you guys all have ability to use SNOMED. We're in the United States, we do. So that's what that disclaimer is. But if you look, there we go, right? We looked up 427.31, and it's atrial fibrillation. What you see on the left-hand side here is you can filter on things, but because I looked up a particular code, it is the condition here. And then if you want to look here, it's either standard or non-standard. You can do all those little stuff. Well, because we looked this guy up, it is non-standard, right? If we looked it up, atrial fib, uh-oh, go back. You'll see it pulls up a lot more. And then your options will be a lot more, right? Here, standard, non-standard. The domains, you'll get all the different domains that you want to look at. So, but if we go back to 247.31, what you can do is you can click on this little guy, okay? And what it basically explains to you is everything I kind of did in the PowerPoint. It gives you that same structure over here, that it's a condition, it's a 5-digit billing code, it's an IC9CM. This is its concept ID. This is the original code. It's currently still valid. It is non-standard. This is the name for it. And it gives you, here are the relationships, okay? And that whole maps to relationship is that non-standard to standard mapping. So per OMOP, we know that atrial fibrillation 427.31 maps to this SNOMED atrial fibrillation of 313217. Okay, and now if I want to really go see what that one is, you can click on it, and it will take you to the SNOMED term itself. So this is the SNOMED term with the concept ID of 313217, and this is the SNOMED code. And here you'll see all kinds of relationship for this particular one. Now, when you're on standards, we actually document a lot of their relationships. We document their hierarchy, we document all kinds of fun stuff about it, associated findings and all that. You don't get as much of that in the source information because, again, our focus is to work off of the standard set, okay? So, Why did I show you that? Because now I am gonna make you guys work. Please go and find me the standard concept IDs for these particular source concepts using Athena. Now, I kind of already showed you how to find the first one, so please find me the next two. If you guys have questions, raise your hands. We'll come around the room. Give you guys 5 minutes or so. Anyone else with any questions? Everybody looks like they're half done. They're done. Yes?
Just a reminder of the distinction between concept ID and concept code. Concept ID is would be the SNOMED or whatever ontologies specific ID.
So the question is, what's the difference between concept ID and concept code, right? Concept ID is the OMOP ID. So it's the OMOP system-generated unique ID that you want to use within the OMOP system or any database that's converted to OMOP. The concept code is the ontology-specific code. So that would be the SNOMED code, the IC9 code, the IC10 code. Everybody got the answer to the first one? No, yes, yes, no. See, some people are paying attention. They're nodding. Oh, sorry, that's the sequel. You don't want the sequel. Second one, anybody? Maybe, no. Anybody want to shout out the answer? Nope.
415-4290.
415. Now, you'll notice that all three of these are atrial fibrillation. The third one, though, is an ICD, another ICD-10. But that particular one maps down to proximal atrial fibrillation because it's at a lower level. It doesn't actually match 100%. So how do we find that third one? Because I heard a couple of answers that were not the same. So let's go back. Right, I believe it was I48.0. So you'll notice there's two in here, and they're both, one's IC9-CM or IC10-CM, and the other's ICD-10. Now, you'll notice that I specifically asked for this particular one. And you'll notice here's the non-standard or standard mapping. It's that one. Not so exciting, but that is how you would look up the standard to non-standard. Now, why did I introduce Athena? Because it is a browsing tool. When you guys do research, a lot of folks have loved using this tool to try to get to the standard. Not only that, but to see some of the other relationship that comes with it. So you can actually click on that guy and go, okay, what else can I find about it? Well, it actually has children. It has these are parents. So atrial fibrillation actually is a parent of proximal atrial fibrillation. Maybe you guys do know that, but for a computer geek like me, I'm like, I didn't know that. So it actually helps, you browse through the vocabulary and see a lot of things that you can find in order to help you build that study that you're trying to build. It's like a walking medical dictionary, but on this one site. Some of this stuff takes me a while to build if I was just having to use Google. I use this to build a lot of stuff. So we kind of went through very quickly the whole concept of what is a concept, right? And getting to the standard and being able to map to the standard. Okay. What we're going to walk through next is what we call the disease hierarchy. Okay, trying to understand the hierarchical, how OMOP already builds in all this hierarchy. So here you'll see this is the SNOMED hierarchy. A lot of people ask us, why did we use SNOMED? Why did we end up picking, when I say we, I mean the OHDSI community. Why did we end up picking SNOMED over ICD-9 and ICD-10, right? Well, before it was ICD-9, now it's ICD-10. One is because SNOMED actually has a much more granular a hierarchical structure than ICD-9 and ICD-10. And actually, SNOMED is international. And it allows for one concept to have multiple parents. Okay. If you look at some of the ICD-9, ICD-10 codes, they really combine a lot of different things into one, versus SNOMED breaks them out and says you can have two parents. Like in this case, atrial fibrillation actually has true parents. It's the parent is a fibrillation and atrial arrhythmia as well. But in ICD-9 or ICD-10, you can't do that. You always have one parent up, right? You can have multiple children, but upwards you can only have one parent. So those are some of the reasons why we picked it. And like I said, with the vocabulary, all of this comes with it. All of the hierarchy, you may or may not be familiar with SNOMED, but that's okay. You actually have all this built in already in the OMOP vocabulary, and on that Athena website, you can actually see all this broken out already. And because all of these, every single one of these, every level is considered a SNOMED concept. Or it's basically a concept. So every single one of these levels is stored as a concept. And then this right here is stored as a concept relationship. So going upwards is an is-a relationship. Going downwards, it's a subsumed relationship. How do I know that? Because I've worked in this model for too long. How do you know that? Because I just told you. So you'll see a lot of that. So when you go and explore the relationship table actually has a lot of information in there, especially, like I said, if you're looking at the standard vocabularies. If you're looking at the standards vocabularies, we actually spend a lot of time ensuring those relationships are there. We don't spend as much time on the non-standard ones because, again, our focus is always on the standard ones, okay? So when you do this, if you go select relationship from the concept of this, you get all of this information. You get things that it's mapped from. Where did it come from? Where did it map to? It maps to itself. It always maps to itself. You have all kinds of other stuff like subsumes, or you have associated findings. You'll have is a parent is somewhere on here. Is a is right there. You get all kinds of relationships. And if you want to, you can then go explore it by doing this, and you'll see that these are all the associated findings for this particular one. It has two parents. It's mapped from all these other codes here. So it maps from SNOMED, HCPCS. It maps from read code, mesh code, cell code. It maps from ICD-9 here. So it maps from all these different codes. It always maps to itself because it's a standard. So even if your code is a standard code, we actually still put its maps to in there. So that when you write your queries or when the programs are doing, applications are doing what they're supposed to do, we don't have to change the program specifically in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so, and then it tells you these are all of its children down here. You can see the same thing using Athena. So like I said, with Athena, here's everything. If we go back to, let's go to parent actually, it's right here. You'll see pretty much the same thing over here, right? So these were the 4 associated findings right there. It's a focus, what focus of? It's a focus of these guys right here. It has a site finding of atrial structure. Its parent is these two, atrial arrhythmia and fibrillation. It maps to itself. And if we keep going, these are all the places that it mapped from. So standard to non-standard map, right? Versus what I asked you guys to look for earlier was non-standard to standard map. This is standard to non-standard map. So these are all the different codes that it came from, all the different source values that it came from. And these are all its children. So it's very similar to that graph that I basically showed you, except it's in a tabular format, right? In here, it's this guy, but in a tabular format. So you can see a lot in our relationship table. We, when it comes to me and or my research team, we mainly use it to find the mapping, right, what it maps to. Because after that, we use a different table to get the ancestral ups and down of it. We don't use the relationship table to find the up and down, because the ancestral table only goes one level up, or I'm sorry, the relationship table only goes one level up and one level down. It doesn't actually show you the whole hierarchy, okay? So what we use to find the entire hierarchy is the ancestor table. So what this one does, it takes all the relationships from that relationship table that was an is-a or a subsumes and builds it into something different that I could easily query without having to do those that are geeks in here, recursive inner joins. Okay, I join back and join back, join back, join back, join back. You don't have to do that anymore. We built a separate table that stores that information. So again, everything is a concept. That's a concept relationship. That over there is a concept ancestral relationship. And we have these things. This is an ancestor. We call this an ancestor. We call this a descendant, okay? Because we're looking at it from a hierarchical ancestral structure. And then these are the level of separation. So atrial fibrillation is a descendant. It's 2 levels removed from supraventricular arrhythmia. It's 5 levels removed from disease of cardiac system. So that's how we figure out this whole levels removed, okay? So here it's 2 levels removed. How do you do that? Like I said, we have an ancestor table where we have the descendant concept ID and the ancestor concept ID. So you can switch and flop them all the time, right? Here, I'm saying this is my ancestor. So how do I go up like this? I'm basically saying this is my descendant. Go find me all my ancestors, okay? And if you do that, then it will go up the tree and say, okay, this is where I am. Get rid of the hold. Oh, the little hold is in my way. This is the little tree here. What you'll notice, you can't see because the little hold is in my way. You'll see 2 different classifications here. You'll see 2 standards. You have one that's SNOMED and one's MEDRA. Remember, I told you earlier that using classifications, we can walk parallel between SNOMED, between the standard and the classification. So you can do that in our vocabulary. So at the same level as atrial fibrillation, this one is the SNOMED code. You can't see this, but this is the MEDRA code at the same level. And then you can walk to the next level above that, which in SNOMED we have fibrillation and atrial arrhythmia, but in MEDRA it's cardiac fibrillation. So you can see all the levels going up. There's the 5th level that we saw, disease of, and then going up even higher. Now, how high do you want to go? How low do you want to go? That really depends on your research, right? Your research, if you want to, make it less granular, you go up however many levels. You want to make it more granular, you can go down however many levels. But you can do the same thing by going and finding its descendants, right? I can go and pick cardiac arrhythmia and say, find me every concept that is a descendant of cardiac arrhythmia. And you do that, and there you go. Cardiac arrhythmia is there, and everything else below that. Now, fibrillation is there. Ultimately, if you do the same thing of fibrillation, you'll get atrial fibrillation. And we only show you one level because this thing is so long. If I had to keep going, it'd probably go to the 1st floor. So this list is too long, okay, for me to show you. Now, how does that look in here? Okay, how does that translate to this guy, right? This Athena guy that you guys have been looking at. You can actually do the same thing in Athena. If you notice, there's a little hierarchy button here. So if you were in this particular concept that we've been in, 313, 217, right? And this is the relationships, because you see the relationship related concept is highlighted here. If you click on hierarchy, you'll actually see that same hierarchy. It's not as pretty yet, so if you like to play around with software and want something to experiment with, you can help us rebuild this page, because I really think it's ugly and it's hard to tell. But it does show you all the child relation, hierarchy. So here's atrial fibrillation, and here's all its descendants. Atrial fibrillation ties to these two right here, fibrillation and atrial arrhythmia. Atrial arrhythmia ties to supraventricular arrhythmia, which then ties back to cardiac arrhythmia. So you can browse the hierarchy using this, which then ties to heart disease, which keeps going up and going up and going up. You can go down if you want, but that same hierarchy you can see in here. How useful is it from a browsing's perspective? Not that very useful. Okay. Later on, what I'm going to show you is Atlas. When you were building cohorts and building studies, that all you really need to be able to do is check a little button to say, give me all my descendants. And that's it. You don't even have to think about it. Okay, so this is another example of us going and finding upper gastrointestinal bleeding. So like I said, our paper that we were looking at was always about the gram replication of warfarin, dabigatran, and bleeding, right? And I don't know if you remember, but upper gastral hemorrhage was highlighted in that paper. So again, if you go do this, right, we go look it up. If you look up upper gastral intestinal bleeding, you'll find that it's in our vocabulary, but it's a MEDRA term, which is a C, which to us is a no-no because you can't use C's in our databases. You have to use S. So here, instead, we're going to go and lowercase it and find upper gastrinal, okay? So you guys can actually do that if you want to. Follow in here. Whoa, where's my little mouse? That way. And we can type upper gastral. I can't spell today. There we go. And you'll see, you'll find a lot of them. There's a ton of them, right, when you look this stuff up. And you find so many of them, you're like, okay, which one is the right one? So you start browsing this little guy and trying to figure out which one is the right one, right? So what we do here then is we want to add in the condition, the domain of condition, and we want standard. So in Athena, how you do that is you would come over here and you would say, I only want conditions and I only want standards. There's still 12 of them when you do that. Right? So then you're thinking, okay, which one is the right one? Because I'm looking for upper gastrinal intestinal bleeding. So when you look at this, you're like, okay, which one is the right one? Maybe you don't know which one is the right one. So you can actually then pick one of them, like, oh, this is close enough. It's acute, right? So you can click on this guy, on the acute guy, and go to its hierarchy and start looking at it and maybe see if you can find. Because you know acute upper gastrinal hemorrhage is, you know, close, but it's a little too refined. So you can walk this guy up and see, look, maybe it's that one. Oh, look, acute, that's acute, but this one says upper gastrinal bleeding. Right? And you can keep walking up or down this to find the one that you're looking for. Again, the UI for this guy isn't as nice as I would like it to be. So like I said, if you're computer geeks, because I heard a few of you guys in here, you want to help us better write this thing, let us know. We'll hook you up with the team that's doing it so that we can make it prettier. I prefer a tape, like a up and down hierarchy, but they did it left and right, maybe because it's a Russian thing. I would think it would be more of a Chinese thing because we go from yeah, we go from left to right, but So that's how you can browse this vocabulary to get to what you're looking for. So we go back to this guy. Again, we found this one. We found the same one, right, when we were just looking at it. And if you didn't really see this one, then you're just going to say, let me see if I can browse up. Right, so we're going to come down here to look for one that's a little bit more lower level than what we're looking for. And you can go and do that same ancestor hierarchy to look at it and be able to see that upper gastrohemorrhage associated with this guy and the going upwards. And if you notice, the next one up that on that hierarchy is probably the one that we're looking for. Now, this is, the hemorrhage here is also spelled a different way than what we probably would normally spell it. And it wasn't bleeding, it was hemorrhage. So you can do this. That's why I said I like this way more, because I can look up and down, versus the UI was a little bit more clunky. But OHDSI isn't perfect. That's why we look for people to help us make it perfect. And that's why we want people to be more involved in it, because there's a lot of work out there that we have to do. And even though we have a lot of people out in that community, it's not enough. Okay? So you can go up and down that hierarchy. Now, if you want to go to upper gastrohemorrhage and go down, you'll notice all these actually do belong to upper gastrohemorrhage. So, you know, acute upper gastrohemorrhage, chronic upper gastrohemorrhage, esophagus, which is at the top as well. So all these fit in. Now, honestly, like I said, maybe a lot of you guys are medical folks in here, so you would have known that these are all the descendants of that. For me, I don't know. And I honestly don't know which one of these would be captured in the data. I don't know, okay? So when we're doing research, when I do this, somebody says, give me this one. Unless they are very particularly only looking for that disease, I always, in my studies, goes, give me all this one and all its descendants. Because there are times you don't know what level of the data, of your data is captured, right? Most of yours probably is at the lowest level, but not everyone is like that. So like in Canada, the database that we have, it only goes to the 3-digit ICD-9 code. So you don't know the last 2 digits, because that's their rule. So if you always went down to the lowest digit, you may not get that. You won't find anybody in Canada, because they're at a much higher level. So that's why we always start at the level that we think is appropriate and then say, give me all the descendants, because they'll capture more, especially when you go from one database to another, especially if it's a database that you don't have, right? If you're gonna do these type of what we call network studies, it's best to find the level that you believe, you know, would capture most of what you're looking for. Okay, your turn. Using Athena, if you could, find me the standard concept IDs for these particular conditions. And again, raise your hand if you have any questions. Everybody done with all 3? Okay, so what's the answer to the first one? Anybody?
17009.
Okay, cool. Second one?
434271.
Okay, third one? I'm sorry, what was that?
4290993.
Anyone get this one? You guys got the second one. So let's look at that last one. Now, Athena may have already been corrected for this, maybe, but that was one of my trick ones. So if you look up ingrown toenail, and we look for standard, you'll notice there's no ingrown toenail at all, right? What you'll find is ingrowing toenail, right? So what you have to go up here and do is going in growing toenail. And then you'll see standard, there's actually 2 of them. Why are there 2? Don't ask me. Go put that out in the forums and have them fix it. So if you do find these, and then we actually already did, that's how SNOMED was built. So what this would end up having to be going back and asking SNOMED, what is the difference between the 2? Right? So we would then work with the SNOMED community and ask them and figure out. But I keep this one in here as a trick, just to show you guys that, one, we're not perfect. We're not claiming the OHDSI world is perfect. We do make mistakes, or there are peculiarities like this that pops up, and which makes you then go, okay, is this right or wrong? And this is my cue to tell you, go to our forums and actually talk in there and ask those questions. Because that's the only way as a community that we will see whether or not things are right or wrong. Even if you don't want to post in there, at least go there and read our post, and you'll see a lot of interesting things in there. And they're a group of awesome people. There is no such thing as a stupid question in our book. You can just come out there and introduce yourself and say, hey, I'm new. I want to ask these questions. Can you help us? And sometimes you'll actually get some of those enthusiastic people who says, do you have time? I'll schedule an hour or 2 with you, and I'll sit down with you and chat and help you out with what you're looking for. So it's like free consulting sometimes out there. We do things that are just because we are that passionate about it. And we want every new person to feel like they're part of this big, gigantic community, and that we want them to start being able to contribute, right? So in order for us to do that, we have to contribute to them, because we want to show you guys and whoever wants to join our community that we are a group of passionate and sometimes crazy people.